Oh my. Hello. How can I help you? Are you selling something? It's bucketing down out here. Why don't you just come in from the rain? My. I'm afraid you were rather drenched to the bone. You said you weren't selling anything, and I am afraid I'm not familiar with you. So my guess is you're here about the stories, am I correct? Nothing to be ashamed of. It's October. The days are growing shorter, the weather cooler, and it's in our bones to start pondering about ghosts and spirits and things that go bump in the night. And on a day like today, why not check out the spooky old house in the neighborhood that everyone talks about, right? Well, it's coming down awful hard out there. If you wish, you can get dried off and then warm up in the library. You're shivering and looking rather pale. But we can't have you catching your death now, can we? I'm afraid we're already at capacity. There. Now that's better. Good choice with the Earl Grey. I've always been partial to it myself. So, you wanted to hear about ghosts. Well, for better or for worse, you've come to the right place. I suppose while you dry off and warm up, I can regale you about some of the history of ghost stories. Back in Edo-era Japan, during the long summer nights, there was a game that samurai would play as a means of testing their mettle called The Gathering of 100 Tales of the Supernatural. The game was simple. Light 100 candles or lamps, sit in a circle, and tell ghost story after ghost story after ghost story, snuffing out a candle with each passing one. Every person took a turn, each telling a scarier and scarier story as the darkness slowly took over the room. It was said that by snuffing out the very last candle, there in its place will be a spirit called forth by the ritual. One could say it's rather similar to another ghost story we're all familiar with by the name of Bloody Mary. Needless to say, the game ended earlier more times than not. Now, if we were to fly across time and space over to Victorian-era Britain, the spookiest holiday would be upon us. There's a night of each year throughout history that struck fear in the hearts of the UK and Europe. A night where, amongst other things, people made lanterns to stave off the darkness and stayed indoors with warm beverages and huddled together by the fire to tell ghost stories to one another. That night was the winter solstice, the longest night of the entire year. No electricity to warm, and light bulbs to keep back the pitch that was the night, which had its traditions later absorbed into what became known as Christmas, or in our case, Halloween. At the time, though, in Edwardian and Victorian London, it wasn't the same holidays as we experience today. Be it the warm days of Japan, the cold nights of London, or even present-day America, ghost stories have long been a significant aspect of our shared human history. They reflect and shape the way we've evolved, whether it's been apparent to us or not. These supernatural narratives offer a glimpse into our fears and our beliefs and our moral outlooks, all from different cultures. Historically, ghost stories have served as tools for education, expressing important cultural values, and have even been used as cautionary tales across generations. As society has evolved, so too have our ghost stories, mirroring changes in morals, history, and collective consciousness. They highlight shifts in our understanding of life, death, and the unknown, revealing much about our journey from ancient superstitions to modern-day anxieties. The pulse-quickening and nervous laughter-inducing allure of ghost stories are merely window dressing for their role in helping us confront and make sense of the mysteries that lie just beyond our tangible world. All I'm hoping to inform you in this short amount of time is merely just a few seeds worth of understanding and appreciation to plant into your mind so as to show you that yes, ghost stories are able to scare us by making us aware of overt and underlying fears in our souls, such as loneliness, the unknown, strangers, and so many other things to list. But ghost stories also give us things such as empathy, knowledge, insight into our grasp on grief and acceptance, and even give us a window to view parts of our heritage and our history. Now, are you sure you want to hear about all this? Okay, I'm taking your word for it. Are you comfortable? Is the tea helping? Good. Now, on to topic 1 of 3. The ghosts that walk the very corridors and basements and attic spaces in our hearts and minds, what chains do they carry? In the very marrow of each of our beings, whether we say it aloud or even fixate our thoughts upon it or not, we all want one thing when we are resting our heads at night, or resting our heads for the last time. And that is a clean conscience, a blank slate, all debts paid. But what if they weren't? What if there was some unfinished business? What if there was something we needed to learn from those who came before us? Or worse, what if we had to learn our final lesson after we shook our immortal coil? There are so many stories on screen and on page of ghosts having to learn a lesson before passing on to the afterlife. Everything from Oscar Wilde's Canterville Ghost to M. Night Shyamalan's The Sixth Sense. But today, to save some time, I'll just focus on one story we all know so well. My distinguished guest, I present to you a ghost story by means of redemption. In Victorian-era England, there was very little in terms of regulations for when people took out loans, and there were zero restrictions on fees, leaving the flock of the general public to the wolves of the financial sector. Needless to say, when someone was to take out a loan, it was purely out of dire straits, as in people would take multiple jobs, sell possessions, or even go so far as to dabble in theft or prostitution before they would consider even taking out a loan. Not only would it take you a long time to pay off, but if you were unable to, there were loads of laws against you, the unfortunate debtor. Men would go to prison and work them off, while wives and children would also work off the debts at factories. The Poor Law of 1834 forced debtors into workhouses, where they would go to work off your debt while being charged for your substandard food and lodging each day you were there, creating a vicious cycle. Lifelong, paid imprisonment. Some of the workhouses had treadmills, not the Stairmasters from the gym, mind you, but human-powered wheat grinders that men walked on for hours and hours on end. So when you know these crumbs of historical context, let me say some lines that may sound familiar. Are there no prisons? Asked Scrooge. Plenty of prisons, said the gentleman, laying down his pen. And the workhouses? Demanded Scrooge. Are they still in operation? Oh, they are, still, returned the gentleman. I wish I could say they were not. The treadmill and the parlor are in full vigor, then? Said Scrooge. Both very busy, sir. Oh, I was afraid from what you said at first that something had occurred to stop them in their useful course. I'm very glad to hear it. Now, this is that ever so slightly curmudgeon Scrooge we all know and love, the man who gladly spent literal decades sending men, women, and children into prisons and workhouses. This is the man we are supposed to root for. Imagine reading this book back when it came out in 1843. A book where you're to cheer on an unregulated capitalist? What makes this all more fascinating is the fact that Charles Dickens himself had to drop out of school at age 12 to work for years at a shoe polish factory to pay off his own father's debt with his siblings and mother. So a precious part of himself was put into this book. Like Louise Bourgeois said, art is restoration. The idea is to repair the damages that are inflicted in life, to make something that is broken into something whole. So why wouldn't Dickens take the menagerie of creditors he grew up seeing and then combine them all into a boogeyman and then just terrorize him into being a better person? The road to redemption for the effigy that is Scrooge is not impossible, just exceedingly difficult. The single domino that sets into motion his metamorphosis all starts at addressing the trauma he experienced as a boy, who was abandoned at a decrepit boarding school for years without a single visit from his family and no reprieve. He was stuck being cared for by the very ones who are ready to apply ample amounts of corporal punishment for every slip-up he makes at school, be it behaviorally or even academically. The term hurt people leaves out one crucial part of that equation. Hurt people get numb to their hurt, and then that pain gets doled out to others. Scrooge, remembering that part of himself and breaking down sobbing, was the shot of warmth that broke the hypothermic state that was his heart. The crack started to form. It took 4 spirits and 1 night to get himself back on track. But we all know that undoing that amount of harm he caused to others took years and years to accomplish. To put it simply, the best apology is changed behavior. And redemption is a continuous process and takes commitment. We need to know that no matter how far down the wrong path we go, that we have the courage and wherewithal to stop, come to terms with realizing how much work it will take to get back where we need to be, to steady our resolve, and then to set about and do it. Yes, it could cost one time and trouble and could be incredibly uncomfortable, but that's what people forget. Forgiveness is free to receive, but redemption is the price we pay to earn it. How's your tea? Need a top off? There you go. Now, let's continue with the second part. As children, the world is so much bigger. Everything is new to us, and in its own way, it's just far more surreal. With age, generally comes insight and understanding. You're worried far less about monsters hiding in the shadows and more about monsters hiding within strangers or loved ones. The darker parts of the world are equally far scarier than they are, and yet not scary enough at that time. Am I the only one who thought quicksand would be a bigger problem? Anyways, While don't talk to strangers is easy to say to small ones, what one forgets is quite literally everyone is a stranger when you're that age. The flip side to that coin is that there are and were far worse things to be afraid of that those who were protecting us would let on. So sometimes those who protect us don't use things like Santa or Elf on the Shelf to get us to behave and stay safe. Other times, they use our own fear against us with ghost stories by means of For Your Own Good. There was an introduction to a collection of ghost stories I read once, and for the life of me, I can't find, no matter how hard I look, which makes me question my own wherewithal, so I can't verify it with absolute certainty. But within the middle of the introduction, the author tells of a small village in the rural UK. In that village, there was a particular issue with bandits out on the moors that were robbing locals, and they were having such a hard time trying to use reasoning and policing to keep villagers safe that one person got the idea to do something a bit out of the box. That idea was to start a rumor about a ghostly horseman riding around at night seeking to take any souls that dare cross its path. Now, with our present collective mindset and having loads of technology, historical context, and electric lights on our side, it seems like a very silly notion. But if you're in a small village with candles and kerosene with nothing but darkness all around you, and the sounds of the wind and nocturnal animals like foxes and owls out beyond those dim lights, to quote an old saying, during the day I don't believe in ghosts, but at night I'm a little more open-minded. Needless to say, the story slowly started to take hold. Someone would hear what they thought were galloping and neighs echoing in the distance, and one person would tell some other story, and another would add their own spin to it, and before long, multiple people had actually seen the ghost. Oh yes, they did. Riding out over there, I saw him in the distance. And then something happened. Less people traveled at night, and there was even talk that some highway robbers caught wind of the stories and even got too scared to venture out even near that village. I know some of you are saying to yourselves, isn't that how legends and urban legends start? The answer to that is yes. The world over has all sorts of tales ranging from the likes of the Flying Dutchman hunting the oceans to men picking up women hitchhikers, noticing that they left their coat, going back the next day to return it only to find out they've been dead for years. Bonus points if the man gave them their jacket, only to go back to get it the next day, only to find out she's been dead for years, and he finds it on her tombstone. Anyways, on top of all that, there's also been a menagerie of ghostly boogie folk that have stalked just about every continent and every generation. Hop over to Ireland, and you have the infamous Banshee, the female spirit who wails and cries from outside your home that foretells a death in the family. Fly to Malaysia, and you have the Pontoniac, the ghost of a woman who died during childbirth who preys on men and drinks their blood. Over in Japan, if you see the Kuchisaki Onna, also known as the slit-mouthed woman, she'll ask you if she looks beautiful and will attack you based on your answer. And for a final example, if you're in Mexico and you don't listen to your mother and come in after dark like she tells you to, La Llorona, the weeping woman, will come and get you. Her story has its roots in Aztec history, but the common story is she either drowned her children or watched as they were drowned in front of her, forcing her spirit to walk the earth, searching for them. Does anyone else notice a pattern here? One could almost fill an entire book on how things like society and religion affects those who are female, and have an influence on how those stories got their start. And the mind reels at what actual events might be at the root of their inception, and how word of mouth over years and years have contorted and twisted and embellished and immortalized them. But I am deviating from the topic of discussion. Again, we are a species that got its start through storytelling and word of mouth. Ghost stories are history in story form, even if it is revisionist in nature. There is one more present-day example that I would like to showcase to bring the main topic of this section home. In Malaysian and Indonesian culture, there is an Islamic custom for when someone passes away, their body is bound in fabric called kain kafan, with a knot atop their head. If one is buried without the knot being undone, the soul will come back to haunt the living as a pokan. During the pandemic, some people were having quite a hard time following the social distance guidelines in Indonesia. Therefore, a local government took it upon itself to get volunteers to dress up as pokan and to go about town and sit on benches in the middle of the night, and to stand on corners underneath street lamps and in alleyways to scare people into staying home. When it comes to the greater good, there can be a lot of interpretation as to what is or isn't beneficial. History always has and always will reveal just how much so in due course. But when it comes to the supernatural, we have yet to see a time when society and their institutions have not used threats of the supernatural, be it specters or the afterlife, as a means to try and keep people in line. It's just easier to start them young. By the looks of it, it seems like you're drying off all right. Want me to keep going? As you wish. For my third and final topic in this presentation, I just want to touch on something of a lesser known topic when it comes to ghost stories. Something quite relatable when one ponders the deeper meanings behind the fiction. It is a subject that is often overlooked because it tackles issues that at times conjures up spirits in our own lives that we would rather have kept locked away behind closed doors to keep from prying eyes. My distinguished guest, let's get to the very heart of the matter with ghost stories by means of love. When a clockmaker is building or fixing or fine-tuning a clock, there are often slight scratches and dents left over after their work is complete. Those are often called witness marks. Whether it's romantic or familial love, the cogs and gears of our very hearts bear their own witness marks, made by those in our lives that we had the pleasure or displeasure of knowing. Ghost stories will often take these abstract and amorphous feelings that we hold deep within ourselves and just showcase it in such a way that helps us see them in a fresh perspective, and in some ways to feel seen, all while being entertained at times. These stories take such things as unresolved conflicts and yearning and loss and grief and fathom deep bonds, and will create art that trends time and space. Even locally here in St. Louis, anyone who has ever been to Creve Coeur Lake has seen the sign next to the cliff that relates the tale of a Native American woman who leapt to her death after hearing of the demise of her beloved, turning the gushing stream of a waterfall that once flowed over the edge merely into that of a trickle, like tears she shed over the loss. Some say her spirit still wanders there on full moon nights, meandering through the forest and around the cliff, her wails echoing throughout the trees and across the lake. And if one was so inclined as to make a trip to the heart of St. Louis, they could hear the accounts of and walk through the halls of a once grand mansion, now turned ghostly guilty pleasure, filled with the lost souls of a family known by the name of Limp. The demise of this family didn't stem from merely the loss of love, but the loss of money, and the growing clouds of greed and power that hung low and dark over them all. Their deaths were either suspicious or by their own hands, all within the walls of the mansion, leaving actually only one member dying of natural causes at the age of 90 in 1974 in another home altogether. These are but two local ghostly legends of romantic and familial love to where we are now seated, but on the page and on the screen, tales of love and family have found their way into our lives more than we give them proper credit for. For example, the canon is filled with such titles as Toni Morrison's Beloved, Ghost with Patrick Swayze, Aaron Morgenstern's The Night Circus, Ashley Poston's The Dead Romantics, Tim Burton's The Corpse Bride, as well as one certain book, The Lovely Bones. If you have not read the book Lovely Bones, it's a story of a teenage girl who, after being murdered, watches from the afterlife as her family and friends, and even her murderer, struggle to move on with their lives while she comes to terms with her own death. There is a quote from the book that rings out to me. These were the lovely bones that had grown around my absence. I began to see things in a way that let me hold the world without me in it. The events that my death wrought were merely the bones of a body that would become whole at some unpredictable time in the future. The price of what I came to see as this miraculous body had been my life. There's a wholeness to us that is an us as a unit, a couple, a family. And when that part of us has been removed, be it life journeys or death, there comes with it pain, loss, an emptiness. There's a hole where there once was something so vital, someone so vital. Sometimes healing is easier than we'd like to admit with some. Other times we feel we would never ever be made whole again. The wound is just so deep. But after an amount of time, we're up again. Walking, functioning, realizing that despite our world having crumbled, everyone else milling about work and stores and everywhere else we frequent, their world just keeps moving along like nothing has happened. Sometimes it can be comforting. Other times it's isolating and cold, and you feel hollowed out to practically nothing. And when you feel yourself almost floating through those places and through those crowds, even you may feel a bit like you're a ghost. And that's okay. You're still here. And in their own way, so are the ones we lost along this journey. Sure, you may emotionally walk with a limp. There may be scars that will last a lifetime. To quote psychologist Dr. Eleanor Hahn, scars are a testament that I can love deeply and live deeply and can be cut or even gouged, and that I can heal and continue to live and continue to love, and that the scar tissue is stronger than the original flesh ever was. Scars are a testament to life. Scars are inevitable and should be embraced, as we are a kintsugi patchwork of love and loss, and sometimes the memories and emotions attached to those we lost linger, floating in and out of the halls and rooms of our hearts and minds. A name popping up in a conversation overheard, an old forgotten scent smelled somewhere that unlocks a memory, driving past a certain street or house, The ghosts may never leave, but why would we want them to? We still love and hold on to those we lost, and when we really, really think about it, we still hope that in their own way, they're still holding on to and loving us too. Phew, sorry, got a little carried away there for a moment. Well, I suppose I should wrap this up so you can be on your way. Thank you for bearing with me. There was a comedian that once said in a podcast I was listening to, you always hear about people seeing ghosts from like 200 years ago, but you never hear about someone seeing a ghost from the 1980s wearing acid-wash jeans, a chain wallet, and a Dawkins shirt strutting around. Which honestly, I'd pay to see that. And as much as I love classic ghost stories and tales of real-life encounters from the past, I would be remiss if I didn't focus also on something of a more recent nature. With that said, I would like to read an excerpt from a book and then make my final point. In 2011, there was the Japanese tsunami that took the lives of close to 20,000 people. This book, Ghost of the Tsunami, by Richard Lloyd Perry, discussed the toll it took on a village and a few surrounding areas. The excerpt reads, "The survivors spoke of the terror of the wave, the pain of the bereavement, and their fears of the future. They also talked about encounters with the supernatural. They described sightings of ghostly strangers, friends and neighbors, and dead loved ones. They reported hauntings at home, at work, in offices, in public places, and on the beaches and in the ruined towns. The experiences ranged from eerie dreams and feelings of vague unease to cases like that of Takashi Ono, of outright possession. A young man complained of pressure on his chest at night, as if some creature was straddling him as he slept. A teenage girl spoke of a fearful squatting figure in her house. A middle-aged man hated to go out in the rain because the eyes of the dead which stared at him from the puddles. A civil servant in Soma visited a devastated stretch of coast and saw a solitary woman in a scarlet dress far from the nearest road or house, with no means of transport in sight, and when he looked for her again, she had disappeared. A fire station in Tagaho received calls to places where all the houses had been destroyed by the tsunami. The crews went out to the ruins anyway, prayed for the spirits of those who had died, and the ghostly calls stopped. A taxi in the city of Sendai picked up a sad-faced man who asked to be taken to an address that no longer existed. Halfway through the journey, the driver looked into his mirror to see that the rear seat was empty. He drove on anyway, stopped in front of the leveled foundations of a destroyed house, and politely opened the door to allow the invisible passenger out at his former home. At a refugee community in Onagawa, an old neighbor would appear in the living rooms of the temporary houses and sit down for a cup of tea with their startled occupants. No one had the heart to tell her that she was dead. The cushion on which she sat was wet with seawater. Such stories came from all over the devastated area. Priests, Christian and Shinto, as well as Buddhists, found themselves called on repeatedly to quell unhappy spirits. A Buddhist monk wrote an article in a learned journal about the ghost problem, and academics at Tohoku University began to catalog the stories. In Kyoto, the matter was debated at a scholarly symposium. Religious people all argue about whether these are really the spirits of the dead, Kanata told me. I don't get into it because what matters is that people are seeing them. And in these circumstances, after this disaster, it is perfectly natural. So many died, and all at once, at home, at work, at school, the wave came in and they were gone. The dead had no time to prepare themselves, and the people left behind had no time to say goodbye. Those who lost their families and those who died, they have strong feelings of attachment. The dead are also attached to the living, and those who have lost them are attached to the dead. It's inevitable that there are ghosts. Fiction, non-fiction, they exist, they don't exist. Whether it's on the page, on the screen, or something we personally experience, ghosts and ghost stories have become part of our history and will always have a role in our future. As long-winded as I can get about this, I could honestly sum up ghosts with one word. And it is a word that applies to us all on this plane or in the next. That word is acknowledgement. It is a very human quality to want to be acknowledged. Those who came before us and those we have lost want to be acknowledged. Our personal and collective pain and grief need to be acknowledged as well. Our past mistakes, personal ones, or ones on a grander scale throughout history, very much need to be acknowledged. Ghosts can be certain feelings. Ghosts can be memories. Ghosts can be the sadness of something lost or never was. Ghosts can be the past we want so much to forget or a future we wish would come true. Sometimes those ghosts in the rooms of our hearts and the halls of our minds wander up to the attic windows that are our eyes and stare out at the world hoping someone, anyone, would see them, to acknowledge them, to acknowledge us. So the next time you watch, read, or listen to a ghost story, look deeper. Find the human story behind it. Acknowledge that we all have the ability to be our own haunted house. Because even haunted houses can weather time and tempest. Even haunted houses can greet the sunrise after the darkest of nights. And to all of those who hold dear in our lives, and to every ghost that dwells within our confines, even haunted houses can be a home. Well, it was a pleasure to have your company here. Thank you for listening to an old man prattle on about this and that. I'll go make you a cup of tea for the road. I insist. Until we meet again.